The Formosan Association for Public Affairs is a U.S. nonprofit that promotes Taiwan's interests and democracy around the world. The association just celebrated its 40th anniversary in Taiwan. Coen Blaauw, the senior policy advisor to the association, has been a vital part of lobbying for Taiwan and drafting Taiwan-related legislation over his 34-year career. FTV reporter Stephany Yang sat down with Blaauw to learn more about his work.
In recent years, the U.S. Congress has passed numerous bills in support of Taiwan. One driving force behind this is Dutch lawyer Coen Blaauw, senior policy advisor to the Formosan Association for Public Affairs and executive director of the Formosan Association for Public Relations. Blaauw has lobbied for Taiwan's independence on Capitol Hill for more than 3 decades. He specializes in drafting Taiwan-related legislation, communicating with members of Congress, and recruiting support for pro-Taiwan legislation. One important bill that he drafted recently is the Taiwan Travel Act, which lifts restrictions on high-level visits of officials to and from Taiwan.
These were self-imposed restrictions by the State Department. They were not in the Taiwan Relations Act. They were not part of any law or legislation. They were just the State Department thinking that China would be angry. But at that time already, there was a sentiment in Congress saying that we shall never let the Chinese decide who can come to Washington and who cannot come to Washington, D.C. And so I wrote this legislation already in 2004, and it took several attempts to have it signed into law by President Trump in 2018, March 2018. So it took 14 years for an idea to materialize into actual action.
In addition, before 1994, Taiwanese immigrants coming to the U.S. had to list their birthplace as China in their American passports. Thanks to FAPA's efforts, Taiwanese Americans can now list Taiwan as their birthplace.
I've drafted many pieces of legislation, probably about 90% of the FAPA pieces of legislation I drafted. Up till 1994, Taiwanese Americans had to list birthplace China in their American passports instead of Taiwan. And to my members, to the FAPA members, that was such a sentimental issue. It was so humiliating to put birthplace China in their American passports that they would say, I'd rather burn my American passport than to show this whenever I go into another country. I wanted to have nothing to do with China. And so we drafted legislation in 1994. We found a member of Congress to introduce it, Congressman Howard Berman, big Taiwan supporter from California. He introduced the bill, he made sure it passed.
Blaauw is from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. He became interested in Taiwan during his university years. He wrote his thesis about Taiwan.
A couple of years before I graduated, the Netherlands sold submarines to Taiwan in 1982. And so I thought I should write my thesis about this submarine deal. And what happened at that time is that the People's Republic of China broke off diplomatic relations with the Netherlands to show what can happen if you become too friendly to Taiwan. So I wrote my thesis about this. I was invited to come to the University of Maryland for a symposium. I ran into the people of FAPA, the Taiwan Lang Kongchong Subue organization. They were looking for a new director. And they offered me the job, and it was in 1989. I thought I'd do that for 1 or 2 years, and it's now 34 years later.
In the course of his work for FAPA, Blaauw has worked with many leading figures of Taiwan's democracy. He's also faced strong pressure from China and overcome many difficulties.
Historically, we have always faced counter-actions by the Chinese lobbyists and by the Chinese embassy. The Chinese embassy has 42 lobbyists in their embassy, and we only have maybe 1 or 2. And so that's already an unfair start. But in the past, the Chinese lobbyists have always tried to sabotage FAPA's work. We even have a letter in our office to members of Congress which says that FAPA is a terrorist organization.
Throughout his career, Blaauw was able to witness Taiwan's democratization and transformation. He's proud of what Taiwan has accomplished, but says there's still much to be done. One of his primary goals is to bring Vice President Lai Ching-te and President Tsai Ing-wen to Washington, D.C. Another goal is to change the name of TECRO, the U.S.-based embassy, from the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office to the Taiwan Representative Office.
I think Taipei is a terrible name to use for a embassy, quote unquote, that represents the whole country. We believe that the future of Taiwan stands on two pillars, on two legs. The first leg is US support, and the second leg is the will and wish and determination of the 23 million people of Taiwan to keep Taiwan free.
Having lobbied for Taiwan for 34 years, Blaauw hopes to continue the fight for Taiwan's rights and democracy. FTV reporter Stephany Yang and Chen Kui-hong in Taipei.